What's up, everyone? This is Medical Device Matt. Really excited for this episode. My special guest, my dog, going to be running back and forth behind me, but that's all right. I also want to recognize I've been watching my episodes, just seeing how I can improve. Cracks me up. Some episodes I have a mustache, some episodes I don't. Long hair, short hair. It's just funny how week by week my appearance changes. What I really want to talk about today is something that happened to me recently, and I want to share about navigating your career. I spent 10 years at a very large medical device company, a big strategic, and I want to talk about navigating those 10 years and also knowing when it's right to leave a company for further growth and development. At the larger companies, and if you went to a large university, you're very accustomed to this where you need to take control of your career. There's a ton of resources, be it at the academic campus or at these larger companies, but you need to advocate for yourself. You need to tell your manager what you want to do. And what's hard, especially in college, is sometimes you don't know what you want to do. So you think you could be great at a bunch of things. And let's say, for example, in work, you say, I want to go in sales, or I want to be a field trainer and work with new hires, or I want to train physicians, or I want to go internal. And you know you could do really well in all those roles, but sometimes it's not good to say 5 different things. So how do you solve that? You get exposure from your manager. You ask for connections to these different roles so you could learn more about them so that you could have that career path and say, hey, I want to work towards being a sales rep. How do I get there? Your manager will tell you, well, I think you should do this training course. I think you should get an MBO or some position that you could show growth at and all of that. So my big lesson there is take control of your career, but I really want to focus on is the opportunity to leave the success you've had at a company for a new opportunity, right? And if you haven't done that before, it's a lot to process. And for me, I want to talk about my experience because no one ever really talked about when it's time to leave or navigating that. So I'm going to break this episode talking about feeling the need to move and grow my career to also how to properly navigate because the medical device industry is so small that you want to maintain those really good relationships you have internally, externally with customers as well as you're going to maybe cross paths with them. If you go to a startup, maybe your company gets purchased by them. If you go to another big strategic, maybe you hire people from your old company or someone from your old company becomes your future boss. So what I want to talk about first is my first 10 years. I've talked about this a lot at a big strategic. And I view my life in kind of timetables of 3 to 4 years, and part of that is because I feel like there's a lot of growth, similar to high school or college. But when I look at my last 10 years, I was growing in different ways. I was a pacer clinical specialist, moved over to a TAVR clinical specialist, and then eventually a few years in sales in one of the top divisions. And I was also getting my MBA, but I always wanted to learn and to grow. Money was important. I needed to sustain a life in California, but what I really prioritized was career development, but more so experience, education, and knowledge. There was never a goal of 5 years I want to do this. I just wanted to be in the best position possible. And to me, what rang in my head was, you got to create your own luck, or fortune favors the bold. Give yourself the skills so those opportunities open. So when I look at pacing, I learned how to work with physicians. I learned how to work in the cath lab. I learned a really amazing device that's clinical and technical. And then after 4 or 5 years, I wanted something new. So I saw TAVR as a really growing field that would further challenge me to grow because I was going from venous with the pacemaker systems to arterial. And from a business perspective, it's a very high growth market, a very different sales method, and very different physicians you're calling on. So I had that opportunity and I was able to learn that product and grow. And then I wanted to grow into sales and become a sales leader. So I was eventually plucked to be an account manager and learn the sales skills and was able to grow my territory and demonstrate really high revenue growth so that the company saw, how I was successful. And that's really how a company measures your success, is if you're hitting plan and revenue growth. And at that time, 3 years in that role, I was given the opportunity of a lot of committees at the company to learn and network with people across the country. There was a lot of internal educational trainings that were really amazing that could help hone your sales skills and also leadership skills. But I was starting to feel the urge that I wanted a little bit more. I wanted a little bit more impact. I wanted to sit at the C-suite table per se, or just have a little bit more of a stronger voice. I wanted to learn through experience, right? And another quote, I'm sharing these quotes because this is kind of many moments got me to this point, and maybe you're feeling this as well as you navigate your career. But I always remember, it's not the critic, it's the man in the arena, right? And I was thinking, I'm learning a lot, almost like a critic or in the classroom, but I wanted to learn through experience. And not so much I wanted to make mistakes, but I wanted the experience of learning. And I was really at my current past company, I was at that max point. I felt really comfortable. And again, another quote, I'm uncomfortable being comfortable, right? So I was feeling like I got the routine, I got the sales process, I feel like I was maxing my accounts, and I wanted something further to grow myself. And before I go on further, I want to acknowledge, your reason to work can be totally different, and it's really good to understand what your reason is to be working, right? And I say that because you might be in a different spot, or some people are like, "Hey, Matt, listen, I need to make money for my family. We're in a tight situation, so I need a stable job." So if that's the case, you're going to have a different criteria for if you should leave, or if you need a new job, or your focus might be, financial, right? Might be financial, right? But for me, being a little bit younger, and I haven't disclosed this, but I do believe in passive income and being financially secure. For me, my most important drivers were education, growth, career opportunity, and putting myself in a position to succeed. And again, a friend was an entrepreneur, and he shared a quote that he rather be the head of a chicken than the tail of an ox, right? And I started thinking, and these moments got me to think of what I wanted in my career. And a couple of things happened where I needed to advocate for myself at the large company, and apply to jobs internally and let my manager know that, for 3 years I've been in this role, I'm looking for this, and see where it took me. And a lot of times these large companies will take care of you if you are vocal, if you advocate for yourself. A lot of amazing opportunities globally, internally. You just need to share what you want to do. So I think that's important, and this we'll talk about at the end. When you are leaving a company, it's nice to have some signals out there to let people know that you want to grow. But all these different moments led me to the point where I wanted something else. I wanted to grow, and it was this really proactive thought, not reactive. And I'll tell you what reactive is. For example, a competitive company called and said, "Matt, this is the first interview. Say, hey, we want to bring you on. We'll offer you a lot of money, 6 figures more than what I'm currently making, to come over to our company." And I was blown away. And that felt really good to have that respect and someone reach out like that, right? Because that means they've talked to my physicians, they've talked to old colleagues of mine to know that I'm a stand-up person, I've done well. And I'm thinking about this, like, that's a lot of money, and I'm really excited. But this whole time in today's episode, I talked about other things I wanted: career experience, to sit at a C-suite table and share my opinion and voice strategy. I wanted to learn through experience, and I wanted the opportunity to grow. Did this role have those things? Yeah, it had some, to some extent. Yeah, it had some of those. But I was thinking all about the money. And when I think about my pyramid, another quote, UCLA, John Wooden, pyramid of success, a little bit different take. But, for me, money's not at the top. It is on the pyramid. Obviously, you got to make money to live this beautiful life and live in this world. But there's other components on, not so much the pyramid of success, but the pyramid of what you want to do with work and what satisfaction brings to you, right? So things I've mentioned: experience, opportunity, growth. Also, pay has to be reasonable. It has to be a great team. And then lastly, a really good clinical product would hopefully make me feel fulfilled. Like, those are kind of my criteria for fulfillment. And that's what I wanted. So that offer, was really amazing. And I declined in a respectful way to maintain that relationship for whatever future partnerships there are. But I knew what I wanted, and I wanted the ability to grow. So it's important as we go through this process to, be honest and transparent with your managers or recruiters or external companies that might be looking at you, because you never know, like I said, when you're going to cross paths again and work for or work with someone. So I began on that journey of many moments to think about what I wanted to do. And eventually I stumbled upon a company. So in some sense, this episode is a new announcement that I started a new job. Super excited about that. And I'm going to share more and more in day in lives. It is a medical device sales role. I'm covering a larger geographical area. And what else is exciting is it's going to be a lot of cold calling prospects as it's a startup. So there's going to be a new sales strategy that I'm excited to share, and kind of my best tips. But what I wanted to do was kind of share my process of how I got here, right? And some things I want to point out is, sometimes the guys in pacing, competitive companies know you're good. They see you in clinic. They're going to bring you over in a lateral move to raise your salary, and you might be really intrigued by that. And I typically discourage that for one reason only, or a couple of reasons. I think, if you need money, great. But my view is if you're moved over to a competitive company in a lateral move, it's not great because you're viewed as kind of a headhunter. You're going to just be viewed at that company as someone that could bring in revenue, and when you stop bringing in revenue, you're going to be kicked out, and then your old company's never going to bring you back. If a competitive company gave you a diagonal or vertical opportunity to move up into leadership, no one's going to fault you. You tell your physicians, listen, I love the company I've been at. This other company, they're well respected. They gave me the opportunity to move in leadership. I've been trying to get in, as you know, internally with my company. Spots haven't opened. I can't blame them. Geographically, I want to stay in California. But this really amazing role open, competitor offered it to me, so I want to go. Which is a little bit different than the conversation if you talk to a physician saying, hey, listen, I'm going from this product to the competitive product, same role. And they're like, well, why? You're going to say, oh, I think it's better clinically. And they're going to be like, Matt, you've been selling against that for the past 10 years. Are you serious? Well, maybe the money was better. And they're like, Matt, you just moved for money. Like, it doesn't create a great relationship when you move that way. So I'm kind of all over the place. I got a lot on my mind, but I think what I'm trying to say is, navigating your career, as many thoughtful moments that get you to think about moving. It's okay to leave, but be proactive. Look at internal opportunities, advocate. Obviously, if you have a relocation geographically or something, you got to take any offer. If you need cash money because you're strapped, you got to do what you got to do. But when you're thinking about developing your career, move with purpose and move thoughtfully. A lot of people, there's kind of a trope, and I don't know if I believe it, but they talk about a lot of times you can increase your value, especially in software sales or whatever sales you do. If you move companies every year and a half and 3, I think that's true in some senses. I do think there's a lot of growth that could be had if you stay at one company. I think it's really rare in today's age. A lot of my colleagues move companies every 6 to 3 months or 18 months. And yeah, they got title increases and they got salary increases and whatnot. I felt like I had a lot of growth staying at the current company, and then what I wanted, I needed to go external because internal opportunities didn't present. So I'm really excited. So we talked a little bit about that, and I know some people, might be feeling daunting. It might be scary. You might have Stockholm syndrome where you think you can only stay at this company forever. Those feelings will dissipate. Get excited for whatever future roles you're in, but just move for the right reasons. Because if you move for the right reasons, you won't feel any regrets. And a lot of times people feel regrets when they think the opportunity is, greener grass or more money, and then they quickly, forgot that money is part of the equation, but, really great leadership at your company, your colleagues, your product, that all moves into it, right? And for me, I talked about that's all important, but also the opportunity to grow and the experience. And if you are leaving, how do you go about it in a respectful way to your company where you don't burn bridges and you have hopefully the opportunity to come back one day in a leadership role if it comes? And I think it's important to have really upfront conversations. For example, when you join some medical device roles, they're going to say things like, honestly, hey, we're looking for someone that could commit 3 years, 1 year of training, 1 year of doing the role at kind of a serviceable level, and then one third year being above and beyond. And that's kind of the commitment we're looking for, because really we put a lot of resources and time and financial in you. In the first year, you're not really doing anything. We're hoping to recoup that in year 2 or 3. So if that's the case, and you leave in year 1, you're going to burn a bridge. So just know it's okay to leave if you emergency had to, but be honest with yourself in those interviews if you want to commit to 3 years. The other thing is, as you develop, a lot of times companies, if you enter a new role, they want a commitment sometimes for 2 years, 3 years. So fulfill that commitment, and before you end, the 2 year mark, so if you're at a year and a half, 2, and you're hitting performance-wise good metrics, you have good image and exposure to leaders at the company, if you want to move up, advocate for yourself, not only in the mid-year or annual year reviews, but quarterly. Be proactive with networking and see what opportunities present. For example, I gave myself about 12 months internally to see if anything presented. And I never overtly stated I wanted to leave, but I made it clear that I wanted to grow my role. And eventually, an external opportunity came. But for example, if you in a week saw an external opportunity and left and no one really had any idea that you were considering, that might burn bridges. Another thing to do is be proactive in 2 ways: making a sustainable territory that can succeed after you. a lot of people think their value is derived if the sales only comes from them. And I think that's true in some sense, but I think to me it's always been important to do right by the company you work for and create a territory that's sustainable. And when you leave, someone else could plug in and grow it in a different way. And the second thing is be proactive in conversations with your managers, which can be extremely hard and depends on your relationship with them, right? So for example, a lot of times at these large companies, it's very hard to tell someone you're interviewing externally. So maybe you don't have that conversation, but if there are roles internally, you let your manager know, say I would like to apply, they thumbs up, you apply, let them know how the interviews are going, the interview schedule, that's all great. Externally, I get it, it's a little bit hard, but once you have an offer signed and kind of worked out the start date, that's when I would loop in your manager. Probably not before because people could get skittish, but once that's all settled, loop in your manager, come up with an exit plan. Typically we think, oh, 2 weeks, I'm out of here. And med device is hard. It's hard to get replaced in 2 weeks. The territory is going to absorb, the district's going to absorb you leaving, but can you do right and stay, 2, 4, 6, 8 weeks so that they can make the changes, assign clinical coverage a little bit differently to offset you leaving, right? Um, yeah, that's kind of my thoughts there. If I think of anything else, I guess I'll come up with another episode. I do want to come up with maybe a shorter, long video talking about things you need to do before you leave, such as closing out your HSA account, moving retirement money. But today's episode was just talking about kind of that feeling you get when you're ready to move and grow your career, how to exit correctly. And I could give just examples of buddies that left inappropriately, and managers or people won't talk to them, and they just limited one or two largest medical device companies from ever hiring them again, to people that have left and have come back to the company they left 2, 3, 4 years later in a current similar or growth role. um, so today's episode was a little bit different. Thank you for coming along for the ride. This is Medical Device Matt. As always, subscribe, like, more content coming. I appreciate your guys' support. Get a ton of messages on LinkedIn of people thanking me, and that means a lot. I really started this just to provide exposure to this amazing field and answer a lot of questions I had when I was applying and during my career. So if there's any topics you want me to discuss, send me a message.